ladies and gentlemen, Makalasi here, and I just like to go ahead and share with you guys some information I figured out while on my soul journey. And I kind of figured out that while I learn, I was just going to take you guys with me so we can all learn together, and that therefore you guys can do your own research. We can all figure this out together, okay? So what I really want to talk about is when you're talking about Adam and Eve, let's just start right from the beginning. We'll try to make this really fast and easy for you guys to understand. Oh, my eyelashes. Okay. But anyways, so you start from the beginning. Thoughts create reality, right? So in the beginning, there was the tree of life and the tree of knowledge. The tree of life was basically where the divine feminine was. And divine feminine is where you need to go. The divine feminine, just for clarification, is all about birth and rebirth. Birth, death, and rebirth, right? So she's all about cycles. And that's why when you deal with her, she's also dealing with time. And with her, what happened is she was divine mother, and she would also give the Elohim, which are her children, the tree of knowledge. And the tree of knowledge is basically where they can go and learn through thoughts create reality, duality. So the reason you want to learn about thoughts create reality is because you learn and grow through knowledge and wisdom. The only problem is if you don't follow the laws, like the 10 Commandments, just being a good person, you would get judged by the tree of life. And that's where you would have to go to court and you would have to plead your case. Generally, if you want to leave the third dimension, you don't get judged or if you pass away. But however, if you are violent and you do war and you're basically just like we have here in court, then you would have to go to the tree of life. And from the tree of life, you would have to go to court, and then you would have to go back to source. So in essence, the tree of life is where you would have life, death, rebirth, time, and then also where you would actually go up to the higher realms. Now what happened was the Elohims, the ones that were doing violent stuff, didn't like the fact that they would have to go to court, and they feared going back to the source. So what they decided to do is they decided that they came with a plan that they would just cut down the tree of life, which is basically sacrifice the mother. And by sacrificing the mother, they wouldn't have to go to court, and they wouldn't have to go to the upper world, and they wouldn't have to face judgment. So what they decided to do is by cutting down the mother, the third dimension lost contact to the upper world. And in that process of losing contact to the upper world, they were able to not have to deal with death. So in essence, they became immortal by default. And they became immortal in like this immortal loop on the higher fourth and fifth dimension. So that's where they would have like this purgatory at. And in there, they thought they were God because they weren't really technically on the third dimension. They were ruling the third dimension between the shadow realms of the fourth and fifth dimension. And from there, they were immortal. So they lived for like 10,000, thousands of years, but they didn't have emotions like we did. So they didn't feel regret, remorse, sadness, pain. But remember, they lost contact to the upper world. So what they did is from that realm, they pretend to be ascended masters, gods, and fake gods. And that's where a lot of false light. They also created false reincarnations and false heavens. And therefore, people were just reincarnating between the lower third and fourth dimension. And that was because they cut down the tree of life. And because they cut down the tree of life, they needed energy because they weren't getting energy from the source. Remember, they cut down the tree of life. They sacrificed the mothers. So what they did is they went ahead and got source through war, trauma, pain, and taking land. And therefore, they would just figure out anyone who had contact, and they would suppress that. So in essence, they were the ones that they suppressed the land through colonization, and therefore they thought there was just, so a lot of times a lot of spiritual people, primarily I think a lot of people like New Age and stuff like that, they think they're ascending, but they're actually dealing with these lower Elohims. So that's why what happens is now that a lot of stuff is being recalibrated because the tree of life has not been reactivated, so their systems don't work. So what happens is they now need energy. So right now you see like there's a lot of war. They're trying to generate a lot of shadow because that's what they need to feed on. But in return, what the Divine Mother decided to do is she's like, okay, with the Divine Mother was like, okay, well, if you guys are going to be on the third, fourth dimensions, you need to feed people to be on the third, fourth dimension. Then you could just be on the physical, which is impressive because now they're in the third dimension, and they have never been in the third dimension in like thousands of years. But that should generate them from not trying to create wars but they're always going to still be hungry. So real quick, so then when you understand that, then you would understand the Messiah, the story about Jesus, Mary Magdalene would make sense, because remember, Eve is a subconscious. When they talked about the first man and first woman, they try to say it was a physical person, but remember, thoughts create reality. So everything starts from your thought, and from your thought it goes into the mental plane, and from the mental plane then it goes into etheric, and then it goes to etheric, and then it goes to the astral, and it keeps going down into the physical. The physical is the last manifestation of your thoughts, but in reality, thoughts create reality. So why I'm saying this is when you have the first man and woman, the first woman was actually Eve, and she was the subconscious. The first man was actually Adam, and that was the conscious. So what happened is when Eve, the subconscious, ate from the tree of knowledge, she got seduced by the tree of knowledge, and she forgot about the tree of life. That's why in the beginning, Jesus said to eat from the tree of life, because the tree of life is her true origins. She didn't get fought, so when she eats from the tree of life, she gets back to her true origins. And what happened was, because they cut down the tree, the cross, she was like Jesus, the sacrifice. She was stuck on the physical, and the cross was a ritual to keep her bounded to the third dimension world. But if she's on the third dimension world and she gets resurrected, right, by her All-Father, then those resurrection codes is in her, and then now she can resurrect other people. So in essence, you can kind of see where Jesus, he died for your sins and then resurrected. He basically literally came to the physical, died, and got resurrected just to have the codes to resurrect everyone else. And then you can understand that Eve and Adam are the same person, right? Because Mary Magdalene and Jesus are probably the same person, because Mary Magdalene is a divine feminine, which is a subconscious that would need to clean the shadow of her subconscious before she can resurrect her conscious. And as a best of below, if we have to do that with the inner verse, with ourselves, we also have to do it externally on a massive scale, and that's what's happening right now. So that's my quick video. Hope you guys like it, and I'll see you in my next. Peace.